When you think of the Land of Oz, what comes to mind? Probably a girl in a gingham dress, or the Yellow Brick Road, or maybe you think of Elphaba Throp. For most of us, our idea of Oz most likely comes from the 1939 movie, and maybe the book it was based on. It's a perfect American fairy tale, a story so iconic it feels like it's always existed. But the real magic of Oz, the full vision of L. Frank Baum's creation, is hidden in the books almost nobody reads. Baum wrote 13 sequels to his original fairy tale, and while books 6 through 10 were somewhat lacking, in the final 4 something happens. The books become genuinely good. But don't worry, they're still as weird as ever. And welcome to the Chemist's Codex. My name is Peter, and I like to find interesting stories in whatever catches my interest, because I believe those stories can teach us more about ourselves. And today, we finish the original Oz books. I think it's safe to say that Baum often seemed chained to Oz by popular demand, and probably wrote most of the books pretty grudgingly, a point I made rather clear in my previous video. But in the final years of Baum's life, in the last 4 Oz books, it felt like he was pushing the boundaries of what Oz could be, making it feel more like a real place and less like a bedtime story. So come along with me as I explore the often overlooked Oz books: The Lost Princess of Oz, The Tin Woodman of Oz, The Magic of Oz, and Glinda of Oz. But to understand where Baum ended up, let's first understand where he started. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz is a basic story. It's a super linear quest where Dorothy has one clear goal: get back to Kansas. Every single person she meets, every step she takes, all serve that one single purpose. The Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, and the Cowardly Lion take along because their own quests just happen to line up with hers. There's something they all want from the wizard, and it just so happens they become friends along the way. This structure is really effective and incredibly easy to follow, which is a big reason why it's still a classic tale. The plot just moves from one little episode to the next. Meet the Scarecrow, okay, now meet the Tin Woodman, got it, now brace the poppy field, cool. Make it to the Emerald City, fight the witch, expose the wizard, Dorothy goes home. Each chapter is its own mini-adventure, a self-contained problem you solve before moving on. It's a perfect structure for a bedtime story. Sure, there are beasts to get around and rivers to cross, but they're just obstacles on a path. They don't really change the world itself. A lot of the early sequels followed this same pattern. Books like Dorothy and the Wizard in Oz, The Road to Oz, and The Emerald City of Oz are a series of visits to peculiar, fantastical places without a strong central narrative to drive everything forward. The fun comes from the journey and discovering new whimsical peoples, not from a high-stakes plot. While they are certainly charming, this format has its limits. The world felt big, but not deep. The conflicts were usually external and wrapped up pretty easily, and the characters, as much as we love them, didn't really grow that much beyond who they were when we first met them. And it seems like Baum knew this. He tried to end the series in Emerald City, literally sealing off Oz from the rest of the world. But the demands of the publisher and an endless stream of letters from kids kept pulling him back in. It was this return that forced him to get creative. He couldn't keep writing simple bedtime stories. He had to go deeper. This brings us to the first of his final 4 books, where the stability of Oz is thrown into total chaos. Published in 1917, The Lost Princess of Oz is where the formula really shifts. In the introductory note to the readers, Baum admits the main premise of this book came from a little girl who mentioned, "I suppose if Ozma ever got lost or stolen, everybody in Oz would be dreadful sorry." This simple concern sparked a story way more complex and cohesive than most of the books that came before. The book opens with a crisis. Princess Ozma, the benevolent fairy child ruler of Oz, is gone, and it seems she didn't wander off. She's vanished from the Emerald City entirely. At the exact same time, all the most powerful magic in the Land of Oz just disappears. Glinda's Great Book of Records, gone. Her magic tools and implements, missing. The wizard's magical equipment, that's gone too. All of a sudden, the protectors of Oz are completely blind and powerless. The safety net that was always there is now gone. While the earlier books were about personal quests, this is a national emergency. For the first time, Baum gives us a genuine sprawling mystery. The plot isn't a straight line on a map, it's a frantic search for Ozma. All the characters split into multiple search parties, each heading into the less explored parts of Oz, creating a sense of scale the series has never really had before. And this is where the weirdness of the Oz books kicks in. The main search party, comprising the Wizard, Dorothy, Betsy Bobbin, Trot, Button-Bright, and the Patchwork Girl, sets off into Winky Country to search for Ozma. There are several obstacles, of course, my personal favorite being the merry-go-round mountains, constantly rotating mountains that just sort of float above the land. They also come across Cake the Cookie Cook from the land of the Yips, whose magical diamond-studded dishpan has also been stolen. Cake is accompanied by the Frogman, a life-sized, sharply dressed frog who acts as a sort of guide/detective. The villain of the story, Ugu the Shoemaker, is also a big step up, even with the rather ridiculous name. Unlike the cartoonish at this point Gnome King, Ugu is a recluse who taught himself powerful magic all on his own. He represents a new kind of threat, one that comes from inside Oz, who managed to outsmart the country's greatest guardians. The stakes feel real because the heroes are truly at a disadvantage, stripped of the easy magical fixes they had in past books. The strength of The Lost Princess of Oz is this new narrative cohesion. Every weird element, from the Frogman to Cake's dishpan to a golden peach pit Button-Bright finds, is a breadcrumb leading to the final answer. The weirdness serves the plot, rather than just decorating the journey. On top of that, the crisis allows for some actual character development. Dorothy isn't a wide-eyed tourist anymore. She's a leader and one of Ozma's closest allies. She shows a level of common sense that makes her a true hero of Oz. The story brilliantly balances its whimsical charm, like a near-omniscient toy bear, with real suspense. When they finally confront Ugu to rescue Ozma, he outsmarts them and nearly escapes, until Dorothy surprises him with the magic belt and turns him into a dove. And when they finally find Ozma, they do so through careful deduction, discovering she's been trapped inside the golden peach pit in Button-Bright's pocket. It's a resolution that feels earned. With this book, Baum proved he could craft a story that is both fantastically weird and narratively tight. So if The Lost Princess of Oz is a fun little mystery, the next book, The Tin Woodman of Oz, is a character-driven story, with a surprising amount of body horror thrown in. At first, the story seems like a return to form, as the Tin Woodman sets out on a quest to find the woman he loved before he became a man of tin. While hanging out at his palace in Winky Country, the Tin Woodman and the Scarecrow are visited by a young man named Woot the Wanderer. The Tin Woodman recounts the story of his origin, how he loved a girl named Nimia Me, back when he was a person of flesh named Nick Chopper. The two were engaged and planned to marry. However, Nimia Me was the servant of the Wicked Witch of the East. Not wanting to lose her servant, the witch enchanted Nick Chopper's axe so it would cut off his limbs. Fortunately, a local tinsmith was able to replace the lost body parts with tin ones, until Nick Chopper had fully transformed into the Tin Woodman. This origin of the Tin Woodman becomes the engine for the whole book. The Tin Woodman believes that when he lost his heart, he lost his ability to love Nimia Me. Woot challenges this, saying the kind heart he received from the wizard should have compelled him to go back to her. The quest, then, isn't just about finding a person, but an answer to the true identity of the Tin Woodman. Is he just the Tin Woodman? Or does some part of Nick Chopper still exist within him? The weirdness in this book is often grotesque and macabre. On their journey, the Tin Woodman and his friends get captured by a giantess named Mrs. Yoop. Those of you paying attention might remember the Yoop from Book 7. Well, this is his wife. Mrs. Yoop, as it just so happens, is a Yukahu, a specific type of magic user who specializes in transformations, and transforms our protagonists into animal versions of themselves. The Tin Woodman becomes a tin owl, the Scarecrow becomes a stuffed bear, and Woot becomes a green monkey. After a daring escape and rescuing a transformed Polychrome from Mrs. Yoop, everyone winds up in Munchkinland trying to find a way to reverse the transformations. After a brief encounter with a boy named Tommy Quickstep, who has 20 sets of legs, Ozma and Dorothy show up to work some magic and reverse the transformations. The climax of the story is actually rather interesting and quite bittersweet. The group finds the tinsmith, Q-Clip, who replaced Nick Chopper's body with tin, and there they find another Tin Man, the Tin Soldier, whose story mirrors that of Nick Chopper. The Tin Soldier was once a man named Captain Fighter, and after the Tin Woodman rusted immobile, Fighter fell in love with Nimia Me, only for the Wicked Witch to enchant his sword, and what happened to Nick Chopper also happened to Captain Fighter. And as it happens, Q-Clip kept the body parts of Nick Chopper and Captain Fighter, and there's actually a part where the Tin Woodman has a conversation with his former head. But the big surprise is that Q-Clip combined various body parts of Chopper and Fighter into an entirely new person, who he decided to name Chopfit. The Tin Soldier joins the party, wanting to find Nimia Me as well. The Soldier and the Woodman agree that they will let the lady decide who she wants to marry. When they do finally find her, they discover she's married Chopfit, and doesn't want what either of the Tin Men have to offer, even if Chopfit isn't perfect. This is a startlingly strange ending for a children's book. There isn't a simple happy ending. The boy doesn't get the girl, and instead he has to face the fact that time moved on, something that feels strange in the land of Oz. The Tin Woodman accepts this with a grace that proves he does have a truly kind heart. Nimmy is content, and that's what matters. By grounding this fantastical journey in a more personal conflict, Baum created a rather powerful character study. The plot doesn't just happen to the Tin Woodman, it happens because of him. This story is where Baum really starts fleshing out the mythology of Oz. It is no longer the place where bedtime stories take place, it is now a real place with real people. In Book 13, The Magic of Oz, magic, fittingly, takes the center stage. In a lot of the earlier stories, magic was often a convenient fix. A spell from Glinda or a trick from the wizard could solve any problem. Here, Baum treats magic as something much more chaotic and dangerous. The whole plot revolves around a single, powerful, and incredibly hard to pronounce magic word. Here's a Quixel. Ain't that fun? The story kicks off with Kiki-Aru, an angsty Munchkin teenager who discovers this forbidden word that lets him transform into anything he can think of. At the same time, the old gnome king Ruggedo, who you might recall has been exiled to the surface, is scheming to conquer Oz once again. The two of them team up, planning to use the magic word to create a shape-shifting army to overthrow the people of Oz. What makes the Magic of Oz unique is how it explores the consequences of basically privatized magic. Ozma had long ago made a law that only Glinda and the wizard could practice magic, which created a stable, controlled system, if you disregard all the rampant magic users throughout the books. This lets Baum play with the characters in a new way. The book becomes a thrilling cat-and-mouse game, where the heroes have to find a way to contain a magical power that has no single source, all while trying to find the perfect gift for Ozma's birthday party. There's an entire scene where Kiki-Aru is transforming people into animals and animals into people, only to be thwarted when the wizard, who had been transformed into a fox, overhears the magic word and turns it against Kiki-Aru and Ruggedo, transforming them into walnuts to be dealt with later. The resolution is one of Baum's more thoughtful ones. Instead of punishing the villains, the wizard turns them back into their true forms, only incredibly thirsty, which forces them to drink the water of oblivion from the forbidden fountain, completely wiping their memories. The now innocent Kiki-Aru and Ruggedo are allowed to live in the Emerald City, where they can learn to be good, as opposed to returning them to environments where they could learn to be wicked once again. Evil here isn't some inherent trait, but a product of knowledge and intent. Take away the circumstances which make someone wicked, and rehabilitation is possible. The Magic of Oz shows Baum at his most playful. He took one of the foundational elements of any fantasy world, magic, and stress tested it. He revealed that the Piece of Oz wasn't a given, that there is still magic unknown to the most powerful magic users of Oz. The chaotic transformations were a demonstration of what happens when the magical system breaks down. By focusing on the rules of his world, Baum gave it more depth that many of the earlier books lacked. Baum's final Oz book, Glinda of Oz, does manage to feel like a fitting finale, even if it wasn't meant to be. See, this book was published posthumously, as Baum had passed about a month before The Magic of Oz was released. Even so, the story is a culmination of everything Baum had been developing in the previous books. It has a high-stakes central conflict, character development for Glinda, and still plenty of weirdness that tests the conviction of Oz's power and wisdom. The story takes Dorothy and Ozma to a remote corner of Gillikin country to stop a war between two bizarre groups: the Flatheads, who carry their brains around in cans, and the Skeezers, who live in a glass-domed city in the middle of a lake. Ozma, as the ruler of Oz, feels a duty to bring peace to her entire kingdom. This is a political and diplomatic mission, which shows a level of leadership that hasn't really been seen since she was introduced. After learning why the Flatheads want to go to war with the Skeezers have forbidden the Flatheads from fishing in their lake, and avoiding the wrath of the Flathead dictator, Ozma and Dorothy go to the Skeezers to try to bring a peaceful end to this conflict. Things almost immediately go wrong. The Skeezer queen, Kuio, traps Ozma and Dorothy inside the city, which she has submerged beneath the water of the lake. Glinda is alerted to this peril, and the plot becomes a mixture of everything from the previous three books. Glinda, who is usually shown as this all-powerful, almost godlike figure who could solve any problem, is shown here to be fallible. Her magic isn't enough to raise the city and save Ozma and Dorothy. She consults her great book of records and performs complex spells, but that isn't enough to save her friends. For the first time, Glinda is faced with a problem she can't solve alone. This transforms her from a magical plot device into a real character who has to rely on her wisdom, teamwork, and the support of her friends. The book brings together nearly every major character from the series, who all gather together to pool their resources and abilities. It's a massive endeavor that emphasizes the theme of community and collective strength that had always kind of been lurking within the series. The solution to lifting the dome doesn't come from one single act, but from the combined knowledge of the characters and the unique abilities each one can offer. They end up draining the lake of just enough water to reveal the top of the dome, so that they may cut a hole in the glass and lower themselves down into the city. They then explore Queen Kuyo's magical implements, finding intricate mechanical linkages controlled by one of 3 magic words. Once they find the right magic word, the city is raised and they are able to settle the differences between the Skeezers and the Flatheads. Glinda of Oz is the perfect capstone because it feels like the most complete narrative of the Oz books. The bizarre nature of the Flatheads and the underwater city of the Skeezers isn't another quirky stop on the road. It's a complex political and magical problem that requires the combined effort of nearly every hero we've met throughout the series. The book is a testament to Baum's more developed vision of Oz, a world that's not simply a whimsical fairyland, but a complex society that has to be actively maintained through wisdom, courage, heart, and community. And now, before I give you my final thoughts, here is my ranking of the last 4 books. Book 11, A tier. Book 12, S tier. Book 13, A tier, and Book 14, S tier. So there you have it, my completed ranking of the original Oz books. This also feels like a good place to mention that these 14 books are not the only Oz books in existence. After Baum's death, the publisher brought on other writers to continue the story. Another 26 books were published over the next 40-some-odd years, creating the famous 40 as they're called. I will not be reading those ones. For decades, the story of L. Frank Baum's career has been that of an author trapped by his own success, forced to churn out sequel after sequel for a world he was tired of. But a closer look at these last 4 books paints a different picture. It reveals an author in his last years not running on fumes, but firing on all cylinders. Baum pushed his creation into strange and wonderful new places. He traded the simple road trip story for intricate mysteries and psychological journeys. He examined the very rules of magic and showed how fragile they could be. Baum's late-stage Oz was just as weird as his earlier Oz, but it was contained in a more cohesive and ultimately more powerful vision. The early Oz books built a world. The final 4 gave that world a soul. Thanks for watching. If it wasn't clear from my rankings, these last 4 books are easily some of my favorites. But what do you think? Out of all the Oz books, which one is your favorite? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this look into the hidden corners of classic children's literature, make sure to subscribe for more videos.